Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. So, you are a leader, and inevitably, if you stick in this industry long enough, you will be a leader of people, you will be a leader of teams, of yourself at least. This show is meant to offer you resources from across the industry all over the world. We've got guests from all over the globe, and then we deep dive into topics related to running a great coffee shop, growing as an individual who is a coffee professional. And now we have over 900 episodes, actually. And so, one of the great things about that is if you've got a topic you're thinking about that you need some answers to, I'm guessing we have it in our library from the almost 8 years that we've been doing this show. Go to keystotheshop.com. You can search there. You can also, and this might be the best thing, you can also go and subscribe to the show. I think it is the best thing because then in your podcast player, you can go ahead and search the topics. You'll be updated when new episodes come out. Also, YouTube, you are able to listen to all of our shows on YouTube as well at Keys to the Shop. So thank you so much for subscribing. It makes a big difference to follow and like and subscribe and all of the requisite things for social media, staying connected. Now, Keys to the Shop, on top of doing our podcast, also offers one-on-one coaching and consulting for coffee shop owners and operators to help you design, as is our topic today, design a great business, a great coffee bar, like maybe literally working on workflow, but also working on communication, systems, quality, culture, all of those things that come together to create a unique space and brand that in the course of time creates a huge difference in your community and in your own life and in the lives of people that work with you. And that's really what we're about here at the show. It's what I'm about with my clients as well. If you're thinking about working with a consultant, I would be honored if you'd think about working with me at Keys to the Shop Consulting. Go ahead and email Chris at keystotheshop.com, and we'll have a conversation and talk about how we might be able to work together, and Keys to the Shop can make a difference for your business. Again, that's Chris at keystotheshop.com. And by the way, put a bug in your ear for next year. It's going to be pretty soon, only a few months until the next round of key holder coaching groups, these mastermind groups of coffee shop owners that we run at the show. Key holder coaching groups are going to be opening up again for membership in around March or so in 2025. So just stay tuned for that. If you're interested, just again, email me and we'll talk about that. Now, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Arto Brick. If you go to Instagram at Arto Brick, they have a great range of different hard surface, tile, and stonework that will be able to satisfy all of the needs of your business. It's very unique, and they create one-of-a-kind surfaces for your one-of-a-kind shop. Also, you have the Barista series from Pacific. That is at pacificfoodservice.com. But we're going to talk a little bit more about those two companies later on in the episode. For right now, I want to introduce you to our guest today because we're talking about coffee shop design. We're talking about architecture, and it really is a fun topic to discuss because how a space is created, the intentionality you put into something really makes it. The little touches, the ideas that you have to welcome people, and it's like the preparation that you have before people come to your home. This is the same thing with coffee shops. And so I'm excited to welcome today Scott Magic of Magic Architecture. He is an award-winning and published architect whose principles lie in strong detailing, room making, and using materials to bridge the past with the present. And while primarily he's working in the hospitality and beverage sector, his expertise includes retail, office spaces, historic renovations, adaptive reuse projects, and unique single-family homes. And prior to Magic Architecture, he helped grow the acclaimed architecture firm Hsu Office of Architecture, and he worked for architect developer Jonathan Segal. And Scott holds a Bachelor of Architecture degree from the University of Oregon. His Austin-based firm is purposefully kept small, and that is so that they can maintain quality in the engagements and all aspects of the work. And they have lots of projects scattered throughout Texas, California, Saudi Arabia currently. Um, and they've just spread their influence throughout the hospitality industry and beyond with this, again, this philosophy of strong detailing, making rooms. And I love the idea of bridging past with present. I think that is going to come up a lot in our conversation today with Scott. And in our talk, we're just talking about how Scott got into this, how he developed the approach to creating one of a kind, unique spaces, and what wisdom can we glean from his experiences to apply to our coffee shops so that we can, make good decisions about lighting and space and the thought we put into either our first store or our second store. You're going to get a lot because Scott is one of the best out there and has designed some pretty amazing spaces from, Austin's Intelligentsia Coffee. You've got the Meteor Cafe. We've had Doug Zell on the show talking about that in the past. You can find the link in the show notes. And beyond that, they've designed a cafe for Proud Mary. And there is way more to their name. So if you want to explore that feel of what Scott has put his hand and mind to, I think you're really going to be impressed. So I'm excited for this conversation, and let's just jump right in. Here now is my conversation about designing unique and, let's say, beautiful coffee spaces with Scott Magic. Well, Scott, welcome to Keys to the Shop. How's it going today?
Great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I am really thrilled to get to talk with you because, we of course love coffee shops, and you have designed some pretty amazing coffee shops, among other things, in your architectural career, of course. And so your reputation really precedes you. And so talking about space design, talking about culture and impact and the feels, getting the feels in a coffee space, this is going to be fun. So thanks for being here. What brought you to architecture first? I mean, this, it got to be some kind of a deep calling, something from your youth. What's the story about how you entered into that world?
Um, two brief things. I was on a path into finance. The path that every father wants you to take. And was bored out of my mind, and just uh, it was like, this is easy, guys. I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And I had two really influential people kind of who were in my life. One was an interior designer who I had just kind of watched in high school and really kind of admired her sensibilities and way with space. I didn't even know these words then, but I just was like enchanted by her house and by being around her. And it really rubbed off. It's there, as a memory. Um, and so she was really one influence, and then the other, just coincidental influence, was I decided randomly to take a course in architecture my freshman year, and there was, like all things and lucky people in life, you find someone who believes in you and gives you a chance. And I had a really influential teacher named Bill Kleinsesser, who was a great professor at the University of Oregon. And he just sort of took me under his wing and said, "You need to do this." And I haven't looked back since. He was right. I love it. So that's how I got into architecture. Mere chance.
Interesting. So you love the way what your friend's place felt and her sense around style and the choice of how these things were designed. I mean, had you always had somewhat of a sensitivity to your surroundings? Because it doesn't sound like that was the thing that, with finance, it sounds like the opposite of being that kind of artistic.
I think with architecture, it was kind of both. There was a technical challenge, but then there was also a creative sense. And so it kind of allowed me to play in both sides of my brain, or geek out in one way, but then also find beauty in something else. And it really just resonated with me. And so I'd spend hours, just extra hours on that homework just because it was so fun. I couldn't draw. I couldn't draw anything. And it was so it was terrible. And but I could use my words and try to evoke something, to try to describe something. So then it was a journey for me in school to learn how to communicate, either graphically or through models or verbally. And it was really fun to kind of expand your brain in different ways that I'd never expected to.
Yeah, I guess I mean, because it was fun, I imagine this is something where when you're planning a space, you're not just thinking about, I mean, I guess it's both. You are thinking about how it makes you feel, but also the people who are going to inhabit the space. A lot of the spaces you design, you've set foot in them, I'm sure, but not nearly as much as the people who use it every day. But there's an extension of the experience that you have to be aware of. And it sounds like you were able to really feel that, and that maybe what was the exciting part.
It is. I think we, a lot of architects or designers look at things abstractly, like how can I put a material on a wall, or what can I what can I use that's the latest trend. There's a place for that. There's magazines that sell you new product and new furniture, and there's an industry built on that. That's fine for most people. And for me, as a kid of the 90s, just seeing how things evolved in America, I started to see patterns where everything was becoming the same. And what some retailers have tapped into in brands is that we don't want all of our stores to look the same. Maybe we want some like consistent DNA, inherently between the stores, but like we're really lacking richness through diversity in our spaces. And everywhere, every American city has a Costco, every or several, or Targets or Starbucks. Which model Starbucks do they have? Which is a success to them in a way too. But for me, how we create better interactions with people and also connect with people is an opportunity to do that through space and to make new memories. And so, got kind of tying back to your first question, I I think the older we get, the more times we memorize or we have memories of being somewhere specific with someone and what happened in a place. And I think coffee is one of those beautiful things that, whether you're having a great conversation with someone or you're working next to someone and you say, "Hey, what are you working on next to you?" And that kind of new remote work lifestyle. And it's a chance to have great conversations and really share something, over coffee or enjoy the coffee, learn about the coffee. And so to me, it's really kind of tied to being human and living.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I take ownership often in, even the office I'm in right now. It's like you are the thing that your eye takes in. It kind of becomes entwined with you a little bit. Like this is my space, and people say my cafe, my favorite cafe. There's a sense of ownership. Even the baristas, my bar. That language is possessive because that is, our eyes are like our hands. Like we can hold things with our eyes.
Right.
Similarly, right? So coffee, it was something that you entered into at some point with your architectural pursuits. Was it early, and how did that start? Were you just a coffee drinker and then thought, I need to make better cafe spaces to drink coffee in?
Yeah, I love coffee. I've been a coffee drinker. I started drinking coffee far too early than I should have, like around 14, 15, just to get through high school. Um, but I had never really designed a cafe. As an architect, a lot of architects are trained to solve code related issues or kind of coordinate between lots of different disciplines and also help a client, lay out plans and deal with cities and permits and things like that. But I naturally kind of fell into doing interiors a little bit. And I liked interiors because they were fun. They weren't as serious or heavy uh, or hard to do as say a new building. And in fact, they were uh, more relatable in the fact that I could tell or talk to someone and been like, oh, I've been in there, or you can it's cafes and restaurants are open to the public, and as an architect it was really exciting because you could communicate with people or talk to your friends about things. And to me it was a way to show my work to a broader audience than just doing a custom home, single family home for some person where maybe you'll see it in a magazine, maybe not. And maybe there will only be a couple dozen people that ever see that house, because um, that's just the nature of the way custom homes work. And so to me, this was fun to kind of get into coffee shops and then also test ideas and meet people who had different takes on, how they want to run a business, how they want to treat their staff, to how they want to treat their customers, or what's special about their product or experience they want to
Hmm.
showcase. And so I got into coffee on a mere chance. I was invited to meet a couple guys from Chicago, and I was told that they had a coffee bike shop, and I'm like, those are two things I like. So I'll go meet them and see if I can help them, get a permit in Austin. And so that's how I met Doug Zell and Chris St. Peter of the Meteor. Um,
Yeah.
Fun coffee all day concept that Doug had created and have grown throughout Arkansas and Texas. And so they were really fun to work for. And that was kind of my gateway into coffee. And I didn't realize how small of a world it was, but it just kind of it grew from there really quickly. So
So in that relationship, what did you learn? I mean, you had some assumptions about coffee shops, having drank coffee in coffee shops for a while at that point. Working with somebody to design a coffee space, with all of that knowledge that you've taken in as a consumer, how did this all kind of come together where you built something that was going to work for the Meteor, but also something that included your sensibilities and expertise as a both coffee drinker and architect?
yeah, great question. I I kind of alluded to this earlier. I like both things. So, I like making things that are pretty, but I also like things that work. And ultimately, throughout my career, I remember the failures. We all remember the failures more than the successes. Like I think about the Yankees today. Chris. They're probably like, "Oh, we lost the World Series," but in a similar fashion as an architect, you learn from your mistakes. And for me, when you're in a food service or coffee shop, a business, if the flow doesn't work, if the machinery's in the wrong place, if the countertop is too wide, these are all things that will impede the success and happiness of your staff,
Yeah.
but ultimately will carry over to the general vibe of your establishment. And so those subtle things all add up to create an experience. And as an architect, you guide that. You make decisions, and sometimes you have an owner who knows things really well, or if they're first time, they don't know anything. But you have to be able to understand those things technically and operationally in order for the coffee shop to be a success. And so
Hmm.
for me, like I nerded out on that functionality and operationally through all of my coffee shops, but and because they've got to deal with it, and you've got to think about, okay, when are we going to get busy versus when we're going to be slow, and are we running food, or are we putting tickets out, are we counter service, are we to go, all those questions, change how the layout or coffee shop should be. And so that kind of is like where I start. And then the design part of it is really trying to meet the intentions of the brand, but also maybe tap into something culturally that's there, whether the location of the project is, or maybe if there's something really cool about the building, like how do we integrate that into the experience? Maybe there's some amazing brick, or a cool floor tile that was there before, or maybe some amazing, trusses or beams that are there. Like, how do we utilize that as part of the canvas of the space, and try to fold that into each coffee shop's experience.
I love the idea of the subtleties adding up to this cohesive moment. I'm kind of fond of the idea of talking about it like the accumulation of water can look, it's foggy, it's a thin layer, it's transparent, you can't see it until it turns into a water droplet, and then you can feel it,
Right.
and it's right there, and it's a reflection. There's a lot of things you could say about that, but the failures you're talking about are experiments in what work. And of course, by this time that you met Doug Zell, had a rich history of coffee space, production of coffee in cafes. And there are a lot of lessons learned in that career as well. So it
Right.
sounds like you both brought this history of, okay, these things have been tried and found wanting. And these things had been really useful and universally good. And I'm curious what, besides the aesthetics that are memorable, and I want to ask you about this because I know you love to make very unique and like unrepeatable spaces, but there's some universal principles of design, of structure, that make a cafe work. And I'm curious what you imagine those kind of foundational design elements to be.
Where I like to start from the foundation for every coffee shop is to sort of ask yourself, whether you're the designer or owner, is, what's your intention here? Is this a coffee shop where you just want to sling as many drinks and sell as much as you can? Or is this a place you want to invite people in for a few hours, and have them work or mingle? Is this a space you want people to be seen in? Is it more of a dating space, where you're kind of, it's more social or interactive? Um, then there's even questions now too, like, is this coffee shop just a drive through? Or even, now with, the way we're ordering things, we're ordering through our phones. Like, there's new coffee shops that are pickup only. There's no interaction, except for finding your drink with a little ticket on it, which is
Yeah.
mind blowing, because to me it's taking out the humanity out of the experience. But
Mm,
it it serves its place. It's transactional, right? I'm getting my coffee faster. I'm not waiting in line, but also you're missing the chance to sort of ask how someone their day, how's your day, or really engage with someone, and just kind of be human.
yeah.
So I think it's first thoughts starts off with that larger, how, what do we want to do here, and then from there it's about the bar. In America, a lot of coffee shops have this assumption that you need to see the espresso machine. Like, I need to see the La Strada, or my Slayer or whatever. They're beautiful instruments, and they are. They're gorgeous machines, and they make amazing things. But is that what makes a coffee shop? Looking at an espresso machine, and to me, it's not. To me, it's about, um, feeling welcome, and then what is the flow, and what is the coffee bar doing as an instrument.
Yeah.
And so part of that is thinking about, how are you queuing in the space? How are you affecting the people sitting in that room as you queue in that space? What are you looking at while you are waiting in line? Is there a menu board? Do you even need a menu? Or do you have too many drinks to where you have to print something out? Like there, and so you start thinking about the coffee bar as a tool for engagement. Whether you've got things to go, what you want to grab, things you want to warm up and eat, like a croissant or bagel. Um, and all of those things are there for your customer to want to enjoy.
Hmm.
So why not let them look at it and get to experience before they pay you money? So you start thinking about the flow of it, and then you think about operationally. Well, how many people are we going to have on the bar, right? So if one person's taking money, are they also making shots? You might have to in a small shop, or if you're just starting as a small coffee idea, where you're kind of doing the jack of everything. You're sort of just making it work. But when you get to a certain point, you've got to think about, okay, that person's handling all the espresso drinks, one person's handling cold coffee or cold drinks, one person's handling customers and warming up bagels and things like that, just to keep it all moving. Um, and one of the things that really stuck with me is, you know, most coffee bars have a very similar footprint. You know, there's a reason why Starbucks uses an L-shaped bar on most of their locations. It's very linear. There's lots of equipment that can fit on it. You can get a queue. You can also have a waiting line for people to get their drinks. But it's also very like um, what one of my clients was saying is like it's their side versus our side. You know, like that's
Yeah.
someone works here versus I'm the customer.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the best coffee shops I've ever been to, and some of my shops do it better than others, is when you blur those lines between the customer space and the service space. And what I'm noticing, it's fascinating to think about, but like, how can you make the connection closer or even erase it? Like, can you break the coffee bar so that the person can just come and pass the drink to you versus putting it on the counter or reaching 3 feet to give you the drink? And so it's it's interesting, because the bar has so much potentiality again for engagement, whether you're getting stuff to go or you're having the chance to sort of really create a wonderful kind of hospitality experience, or coffee experience.
Why do you think the design of a space that blurs the line creates a better experience? Why is it that like blurring the line? And I recognize this is something that maybe some people agree with or disagree with. I don't know, but um, for you, is it the idea that there's a forced grappling with how to stay engaged in the process of doing hospitality in that space? There's no like safe places to like hide away and disengage. Like what's behind that idea?
Yeah, I was thinking about it the other night. I think what it is it we when you're working at a job, everyone wants to be appreciated, right? And so I'm empathizing as if I worked somewhere, and so you want to be appreciated for what you do, be and whether that's thank you for making this, or oh, this tastes so great, or you want to feel like as a staff person that you're being recognized, right? Otherwise, you're just being compensated for how much time you spend there, right? Um, and and then on the opposite side, the customer is looking at it like, how am I being treated, right? Is this worth the amount of money that I just gave them, right? Or tipped
Yeah.
them? And for me, if there's if there's just a little more something you can give the customer, they'll feel it. Whether that's through someone being kind to them, or the coffee being really good, or oh, I made this special latte art for you. Like, you feel as if the customer feels that they're special and that they're being taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, when you kind of blur those lines more or connect people closer to each other, they feel it's more intimate, and you're sort of creating a chance for, or you're tying into people's instincts to where they want to come back and feel that again.
Yeah. So the capacity to feel is increased when you open these things up, and of course the pressure to perform, and like if you're going to do this, you really got to deliver, because the worst thing that could happen is that you create this promise through the aesthetic, through the design, but you don't deliver with the service, and then people learn to hate, not directly, but they associate a
Right.
style or a color or a feel with dangerous, bad, which is a shame.
Right. It's sort of like you feel like you're taken advantage of, in a
Yeah.
way, or that it's not worth it is another way to say that. And you know, there are places where you do want the show. I think about, I haven't done a coffee shop in Vegas or Dubai, but you see some of the things there, and you're like, it is a show. So how could you make a coffee shop a show? And I think there's some really interesting models out there now that people are dabbling with.
Yeah.
In Dubai and Saudi Arabia, in that general area, there's a lot of experimentation happening, and even in China and Korea, there's some really interesting things going on. So I think sometimes brands tap into an experience and they repeat it, right? And then I think about other brands where they kind of adopt or adapt it per space, and like from the blue bottles to Watch House is a great brand in England that's amazing, where every store is its own little jewel.
Yeah.
And so it's cool to think about that. And so I love, I design stuff, but I also love looking and seeing what other people do too, just because I think it's sort of a shared collective experience, right? Like what we
Yeah.
what we all learn from each other.
Well, hey, everybody, it's Chris, and we'll be right back to our conversation with Scott Magic about designing coffee shops and beautiful coffee bars. But I want to talk to you about one of our sponsors first at Arto Brick, arto.com, at Arto Brick on Instagram is the best place to go. And it is a company that I know has done work for actually our guest today, Scott, in different coffee shop projects. But beyond that, they provide unique and amazing hard surfaces, stonework, tile work that creates that feel that a coffee shop like yours needs for people to really take notice and say, they really put a lot into this space. Look at that. I mean, look at just the surfaces that all of the business transacts over, all of our conversations happen over, our feet tread on the tile work, and our hands and our senses. We feel this, right? So Arto Brick is all about that level of intentionality, and it shows with all of the beautiful things that they provide their clients with. So again, you can go to arto.com. Lots of stuff to see there, but the best place again is to follow them on Instagram at Arto Brick. Tell them Chris DeFirio sent you over at Keys to the Shop. Say hello to Armin, one of the owners there at Arto, and I think you're going to be really impressed with what they have to offer. Again, at Arto Brick. And of course, we want to thank our friends at the Barista Series from Pacific. They have been for many, many years now the go to for excellence in plant based beverages. Their beverages perform on the bar by standing up to the heat from steaming, providing great texture for latte art, and they also keep the balance of the flavor focused on the coffee. And when your customers taste all of that work that went into that, is created for professional barista standards, they're going to notice. So go to pacificfoodservice.com, get samples for your cafe, and taste the difference yourself. I think you'll be impressed. Again, if you're looking for the best plant-based beverages for your customers, then you have to be using the Barista Series from Pacific. Now, let's get back to talking all about creating unique coffee bars with Scott Magic. So I love that you start with the functionality And this is something we do, and we at Keys to the Shop as well. It's like you start with what are you going to do, and then like how do you get there? What works to do that, so that the beautiful thing is functional is the ideal, right? And repeatability of it also for the brand, and they say, well, this is the style that we want. People land on something like that, that they can repeat. But we live in an age where we can really just see what everyone's doing, and we take it that if somebody who we love is doing something, that we should do it too. And for the most part, the average cafe design you can. But I know from talking to you that there is a part of what you designed where you want it to be not able to be repeated, I guess, but the idea
Yeah.
of something that's not easily replicated. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It kind of goes back to that idea of differentiation and the fact that a lot of what I see in America, whether I'm in Texas or Kentucky or California, it's like, oh yeah, it's all kind of blending into the same vanilla landscape, as I like to call it. It's just sort of the same,
Yeah.
and almost to the point where we all expect it now. It's almost trained us as consumers and people who live here that that's what we expect, and so it's kind of boring. If you step away, it makes the people who do something different special because they took a risk or they're not doing what the big boys are doing. Um, and so it's funny because we're stuck in that kind of paradigm here in America, but then you travel outside of America, and people are, some of the coffee shops in Korea are just incredible. They're in these little storefronts, or the ones in Tokyo and Mexico City, where they just have a little bit of something, and those little things are what people remember, and they come home. And I think we're missing an opportunity as designers to do set up those little moments. And so for me, every project has to have something special, whether it's a weird detail, if we're limited on something, or a material that maybe ties to the place that it's at, or maybe ties into the brand somehow.
Yeah.
Um, and really kind of let that be tied to that space so that the people who are paying for that space feel it's special, right? Like they're the only ones who have it. Or if you're a consumer, which is fascinating too to see this, where people will go visit all the shops as coffee tourists, or um, you know uh, it's Instagram, or you'll see it on Instagram or TikTok. People visit these things, and
Yeah.
they sort of fill out the map. Like, I've been to all of these, and it's really fascinating to watch, and it's also fascinating to see people connect with it. And from a brand point of view, what it allows you to do is to use it several ways. One, to tell a story about why the architect or designer picked something and how that relates to you, so you can communicate that in a marketing sense. Um, or you could even use it somehow to turn it into other kinds of marketing, whether it's a mug, or um, you can tie it into your cup design, or you could tie it into a sleeve. One client made little special pins for the project that we did. Another client made T-shirts, and another client actually made gift cards, and they had all of the buildings that we had designed on them, and it was amazing. So the my kids even know those buildings, and they know them, and by the style, like, oh, that one, it has this roof or that roof, and but those are talking points, and that's also it gives you as a business something to define yourself and communicate value and difference in the marketplace that I think is special.
You are talking about some representative items that kind of harken to the roof or the design of the space, and I love seeing that kind of stuff. Sort of be creating an iconic status for something that you've created for people, because you are kind of celebrating it preemptively. Like, of course. This is iconic.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you could give a couple of examples of where a brand had, you worked with them to choose a material or a design in the space itself that really made it one of these unique spaces, like a texture or a curve here, or something that is to do with the ceiling. What's an example of that?
Yeah, I'll give two. One here in the States where we were working on a coffee shop in a in an urban in downtown Austin, and it was in a very beautiful building, very beautiful double class A office building, which is one of those glass skyscrapers with lots of expensive lobby and whatnot, done by a very good firm. But it didn't have any soul. So the coffee shop, what we were doing was literally put next to the lobby, which was all white, and and then the building kind of looked a little bit like an Apple computer. It was glassy and slick, and and then for me, a friend of mine had just given me a book about the Comanche Indians who used to live in Central Texas. So I was really curious about their history. So I started reading about it, and it turned out this building was on a famous Indian trail. Comanche Indian Trail used to feed into Austin and was actually the border of Comancheria and what used to be the Texas territory.
Mm,
And so I was really fascinated with it. And so one of the things that I learned about Texas today and the past was about how the land is inherently tied into everything you do, the land and the water. And without water, there's no life, right? And so for me, what was interesting about that project was I wanted to celebrate this kind of spirit of earthness or the dirt and land in that project. And so I invited a friend of mine, her name's Erin Curtis, to collaborate on the project because she had done a couple public art sculptures on that street. And one of the things that I felt they're just these cool little geometric brick sculptures, but Austin didn't put up a plaque or explain who made all these sculptures. They're just cool little things on the sidewalk,
yeah.
and one of them was on the same street that our coffee shop was on. And so what I kind of reached out to her and I said, "Listen, I want to do this coffee shop about what it's like to live in Texas, like from the dryness of the dirt to also finding those swimming holes and." Maybe there's a little, like native influence in this or not, but like not subtle ways. But like what's interesting about Central Texas is it's so hot here in the summer that we all have to go to places to cool off. And so there's all these great swimming holes, which also were, Native American camp holds or villages. And
Yeah.
so anyway, it's really fun to kind of like think about that history. And so what I tried to do at the coffee shop was tie all these things together from Aaron's art in the city to kind of this historical context. And what we landed on was using a brick manufacturer that was just outside of Austin, about 20 miles outside of Austin, which coincidentally used to be on the same riverfront as our shop.
Wow.
And so for me, it was a way to kind of make it ultra local. Like how can we use material that's really from here
Yeah.
and ties the city to all these different contexts or our project to the city in different ways. And so what Erin did, which blew my mind, we had a short build window of 12 weeks, right? Which is pretty common for a coffee shop. So she called the manufacturer and said, "Can I come to your plant? I need to see what discarded brick you have." And so she went and actually picked all the discarded colors and then came up with this tapestry. It painted it and then stitched it together, and then I helped everyone execute it. But in the end, we cut 4,700 bricks. All those bricks were bought for $1 a piece, which you think about is pennies compared to some of the tile costs that are out there.
Yeah.
The labor costs were a lot, I will say that, and there was a little cost to pay Aaron to design it and to really create something beautiful. But in the end, it's like that was a beautiful thing. And part of making it out of brick too versus tile is I wanted to make sure if that coffee operator ever left, it would be a total pain to tear
Oh.
it down. And then also what's funny is it actually works as a mural for the lobby now as you go inside that building, because there was such a lack of color and interest. And so it's become kind of this element that belongs to a lot of people. So that was one example. The other example is for a brand in Saudi Arabia that reached out to do a couple shops, and they're a great team, and they had the most wonderful branding. I I remember when they sent me their information. I adored their branding, and in a different way, it was like, well, how can we tell a story? How do I tell a story for them? And what we landed on was that each store needed to be a story about this animal, and their brand is named after a Saudi Arabian gazelle
Hmm.
called Idmi. And what we what we were interested in doing for them was creating something that was very different than other coffee shops, of course, but that would be somehow tied to their brand, but not just copy paste, not just like take the colors and apply them to the wall, and but not do it in an insulting or photorealistic way. And so where my mind went was looking at the gazelles, and the I wanted to tell a story about that. We've done a couple now, so each store now is a story about the animal finding a watering hole, or
Uh,
being in the field, or in the mountains, and so it kind of creates a story to then create a material palette. And the first store we did was called In Me Dreams of Rain. And so we took that idea and shaped the ceilings as almost like clouds, not just floating in space, but they are the space, like you're walking in the cloud. And then we had collections of dowels suspended from the ceiling to be like rain falling. And then
wow.
to give the space was kind of minimalistic. It was a little like a lot of plaster and stonework. Um, to give it some color, though, we looked at their brand guide, and one day just had this idea about like, well, how could we come up with some kind of pattern for a back wall behind the coffee bar? And it hit me like, well, what if we look at like like fur? Like, what is there a pattern to their fur? And we sort of did this deep dive on the way hair grows in different animals. And so anyway, we found out how the gazelle's hair grows, and then we took that pattern and sketched it into this kind of scaled graphic. And then they took that and they fabricated it out of plywood in the space, and it's just this. It almost looks like rose petals kind of flying on a wall.
Wow.
Anyway, so that's kind of how my brain works.
That's pretty intense, and I love that it's rooted in the story, the place itself, the history, and there's a lot of intentionality going into that. And of course, I think let's just say the average coffee shop owner listening to this is like, well, that's inspirational for sure. And then at the same time, I have a feeling that this is not inaccessible. Like the way you're thinking about this is not inaccessible to the average person. I mean, obviously, these are grand scale projects and high dollar projects too.
Right.
But the concept itself is available to virtually anybody. How can people kind of take that, be inspired, but also apply that inspiration to do something similar in their space for their little coffee shop in their town?
For me, maybe the way to think about this is um, how part of it is about marketing, right? Which we've already talked about. But how you want to create a mood,
Mm-hmm.
and part of it is you do that through color. You can do that through texture, and you can also do it through the things you touch, right? Like for some coffee shops, it might be the collection of mugs that you have, um, it might be the kind of seat that you sit on. For others, it might be the color behind the coffee bar or a light fixture. I think the opportunity is in all of those decisions. And it doesn't have to be something expensive like some of the shops that I've done. I've also done really inexpensive shops where you have to kind of bootstrap it. And the key is to just pick well.
Yeah.
Don't try not to buy the latest trend because you'll regret it, in about a year. Um, find old things. People really resonate with older made stuff. For some reason has a different connection to people, especially light fixtures. Um,
Mm.
and the other part I would say that really helps that most people don't talk about is lighting. Um, you can have a really plain space, and if you put the wrong lights in it, it'll feel terrible. And so, if you take anything away from this conversation, everyone listening, in a coffee shop, I would say never use any LED fixtures that are colder than 3000. Use 3000 and 2700K lights, okay? Don't go colder than that. And the reason is your coffee is going to look good. Sorry, your coffee will look bad. Your people will look bad. They look kind of alien and flat. But the colder LED lights actually make everything feel more clinical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what warm LED lights do is they bring out the skin tone, the reds, the oranges, and make your food sparkle or coffee sparkle. So, I would say if you take one thing away, just get warm light fixtures and stick to that.
Yeah, there's a lot of very clinical space out there in coffee, very bright. And it's the felt impact of well thought through design is sometimes the ROI that we don't care about as much as the thing that is immediately available to us right now. So we can just make the decision and move on to most important things, right? And so we could never even really know. There's no breadcrumb trail leading back to it. Well, the reason you're having people not be as excited about the space is because you chose this kind of light or so it's kind of insidious in that if you don't put the intention in you can still kind of technically get away with it
Right.
because no one's going to blame it on that.
Right.
Right, it's going to be the economy, it's going to be this generation, it's going to whatever it is. So this is really important stuff because it's almost like the dark matter that holds together the universe of coffee.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah. Yeah. But you see it in restaurants too. Like, why does this not feel good? Your eyes start to squint. Like I regrettably am under a downlight right now. But that's what happens with downlights is that they make your eyes and your nerves kind of flutter. They make you somewhat uncomfortable. Um, and so I think lighting is one of those secret sauce elements that make or break spaces. And to your
Yeah.
point, a lot of people don't know how to communicate that or really signal that as the issue, but it really is. It's one of the key issues in spaces.
Well, one thing I want to ask you here before we wrap up, and I'm sure we could talk for a while about all this stuff, is what do you want to see space like just the average coffee shop start to do with more intentionality when it comes to space design? Because people listening will open another coffee shop or their first coffee shop. And I know you've been talking about principles and intention and the story, the functionality. Um, 10 years time, what kind of a landscape of cafes do you want to see out there in the world?
I want to see coffee bars that are smaller. I think like the big coffee bars to me are intimidating. And again, it'd be nice to create different opportunities for engagement. You know, like we've talked about so far, where it's not I love sitting at the coffee bar sometimes, so I can see kind of the action, you know. But also, sometimes I don't want to be by it, or I might want to be away, you know, typing or on a Zoom call or something like that, or doing something like this. It's more challenging now to be a coffee owner because you're having to design a shop for different purposes,
Mm-hmm.
at least in our country. And so I'm excited to see how designers react to that. Like I'm curious right now. Like we've talked about kind of how we deconstruct the bar for these relationships, but I'm also wondering: is there another type of coffee space that we need where we can have privacy? It's not an office, you know, in a sense where like you know there are so many people that are working in coffee shops now. Like there
Yeah.
was one guy at one of my stores. He brought in both monitors, you know, to the coffee bar. They had to talk to him about not doing that, but it happened, and it blew my mind. I'm like, wow, okay, so this is their office in a way. They're working,
Yeah.
and so sometimes people like to work in the open, and sometimes people like to feel closed and feel comfortable. Or if you're on a Zoom call, you know, there's acoustic issues with all that noise around you or the
Yes.
speakers bumping. And so I think what's interesting is maybe there's a space to develop where, you know, maybe there's curtains or a dropped pod or some sort of quasi like partially open space that can feel more intimate and kind of capture the sound more, so it's a little quieter. And so you kind of have that balance of like the loud open spaces, the social spaces, the interactive spaces, with also these kind of quiet spaces. So I think we need both.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and the especially around the idea of small, and especially the increased costs of just doing business on top of that, material costs, but the cost of experience when you're in a small place. Some of my favorite places have always been places where you have no choice but to be in it, and you feel it. It's intense. It's a little shot of espresso for culture and design. So I love that. Well, Scott, this has been fantastic, and I want to invite you to share with us where we can learn more about what you do in your work.
Yeah, no, it's been great to be on this, Chris. You can follow me on Instagram. Tag is at Magic Architecture, or you can go to my website, which is scottmagic.com. Uh, and yeah, and see some of our work. We're always putting up new stuff, and got a couple coffee shops underway. So yeah,
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time. This was a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your wisdom.
Chris, thanks for having me.
Okay, everyone. Well, I hope that you really enjoyed that conversation. And just, it is something that I don't know. It just resonates with me so much to hear the passion and I'll use the word intentionality again. We'll use the design element of creating a coffee shop experience for your customers. It is so great to know that we have people like Scott out there helping coffee shop owners create these one of a kind spaces, because we spend a significant portion of our lives in coffee shops if we're fans of coffee shops, or if you're an operator, a very significant portion of your life. And so why not make it beautiful and functional, and just it works so well. What a delight. And I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation, and I hope you walked away with some really great insights and tips and tools and approaches for your next project. And if your next project involves hiring an architect, then Scott is here. To reach out to Scott, all you need to do is go to scottmagic.com, and that will launch you into all the different projects and how to contact him, start a conversation, and all of that fun stuff. So Huge thank you to Scott for being on the show. We so appreciate your wisdom and insights shared with the Keys to the Shop audience. And if you have any questions about this conversation or anything else on the show, always feel free to email chris@keystotheshop.com. If you're looking for a consultant or coach for your coffee shop, for yourself and your team, then also reach out. Let's have a conversation. chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, that will wrap up our episode for today, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe, follow the show wherever you listen, and share the episodes on social media in whatever clips and content you think this is really cool. Pass it on to the next person in the community, and that's how we grow the exposure people have to this show. Then I really thank all of you for doing that who have already done so, and I'm always grateful for you listening. Thank you for your support of the show. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.